Okay, let's get going. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on this. We think it's the sixth of the Zurich Municipal, in partnership with Zurich Resilience Solutions Risk webinar series. My name's Alex Bedford, for those of you who I haven't met before. I'm Customer and Partnerships Manager at Zurich Municipal. So today we are talking about escape of water and mastering escape of water claims, which I think is a hot topic for absolutely everybody. It's that perennial kind of claims type that sits at the top of the hit list. There's so many different factors to consider. So it's really brilliant that we've got a comprehensive coverage of the issues that you want to be thinking about today. The webinar is going to be recorded as previous ones had, and you will be sent a link to the recording that will be held on YouTube for you to watch back or for you to share with other colleagues so they can hear our messages too, which I know has been done a lot with previous webinars that we've held. So we won't be sending the slides round. We will be sending around the recording to the webinar so that you have the slides and the context against those. If you want to ask questions, we've got time at the end for Q&A, as you can see, so please do use the chat function to put any comments or questions that you want our experts to address, and I will come back to them once we've heard their presentations. So today we're fortunate to be joined by, as I said, three experts. So Paul Gallagher from our major loss claims team will talk us through escape of water claims that we see. Then another Paul Vincent, our escape of water risk specialist from Zurich Resilience Solutions. We'll talk about impacts and prevention strategies that you can put in place. And then finally, we're joined by Andrew Jones from Acryleak, who can talk about the way that technologies have advanced in order to help you manage these claims more effectively in your properties. So lots to get through. Without further ado, I will hand over to Paul Gallagher to take us through those claim stories. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Gallagher from our major and complex loss team. As mentioned, escape of water is the largest type of claim just now and accounts for literally 1 in 3 claims across the UK. And the impact of these claims are financially very high. They continue to reach new heights year on year. Escape of water claims often arise from unexpected water leaks or bursts within a property, leading to extensive damage usually throughout the property. And I've listed some common causes just now. I won't go through each and every individual one of them, but you can see there is a number of different types of escape of water. But probably one I'd want to bring your attention to, which is when the property is unoccupied, and ensuring you meet the policy conditions with regards to that is generally, if a property is going to be unoccupied for over 30 days, water needs to be stopped to the property, stopcops, etc. need to be switched off. So that's just one to be aware of. But the general escape of water are pretty common across the board. There is some pictures here with regards to the main ones. So DIY gone wrong. You're a general escape of water from burst pipes, which can either happen behind the wall or under baths, etc. And it generally usually comes across with a lot of extensive damage across the property. So what do we see with regards to escape of water claims? What are the issues we're seeing just now? And a lot of the main issues are due to the rising costs with regards to alternative accommodation in particular, because of the extensive damage that these escapes of water cause. Then customers are generally have to be moved out of the property, but alternative accommodation is on the increase, and the reasons for the increase in that is a rise in tourism following back to pre-pandemic levels, increased government demand. Landlords are generally withdrawing from the market, the buy-to-let property market, due to a number of bills and laws put against them. The hotel costs are increasing just general year on year, and with councils spending a lot more on hotels just due to the lack of available accommodation in the properties. There is extended repair schedules, and there is a lot of delays probably in the repair chains just now. We've got supply chain issues, labour shortages, sometimes unforeseen site conditions, budget inaccuracies. So a contractor quotes for a repair, there's unforeseen damage, they need to come back, get pre-approval. And again, it all just adds to the delays of the claim. With regards to major disruption, so this is probably the biggest one for the customer. In general, as I've said before, the customer do generally need to move out of the property just due to the extensive damage, potential mold growth, etc. And it's just not habitable for them, and nobody wants to be moving out of their own house. And with that, their potential delays, it just makes it an unpleasant experience for the customer at hand. One of the problems we see is the elongated process of the water coming out the pipes or wherever it may be, just due to lack of knowledge where the stopcock is at the within a property. And that is a general theme we are seeing at the minute, that customers just don't know where the stopcock is. So what we're saying with regards to how do we manage an escape of water claim? So in order to minimise the damage, we want to try and stop the leak immediately by turning on the main water supply to the property, drain down the system, and then power down any electrics that may be within the vicinity of the area using the main control panel, just to avoid any potential electrocution. We want to document the damage, so any photos and videos, get customers to take photos, videos, whatever it may be, just so we can see the damage pretty much straight away firsthand. Take a detailed list of all the damage and contact the insurers. It's imperative to contact the insurers immediately. Sorry, with regards to it. Just provide the insurers with the details of documentation, and with regards to that, if the insurer's got the capability to start the drying and the water removal process, then by all means they are at their liberty to do that. But if not, the insurer will certainly arrange that and get dehumidifiers installed within the property, and then arrange for emergency repairs if needed. But as always, probably the best way is prevention is the key message, probably beforehand. So I've got a few case studies, and it just shows the difference area in market, I would probably say, because we've got pretty much standard escape of water claim in case study 1, where the insured reported a claim. It's been informed by their neighbour that a fire alarm been going, so the water's tripped the fire alarm's been going. Water's been running down the walls at the property, resulting damage to walls, ceilings, floors. The insured is claiming for the reinstatement of the property, loss of rent, or alternative accommodation. There is generally no concerns with regards to coverage in these types of claims because it is unforeseen for the customer, and it generally is an escape of water. So what happens, and usually in these circumstances, the loss adjuster is appointed to assess the damage, request the estimates, take photos, arrange drying, etc. And then costs are agreed and reinstatement work is pretty much commenced with regards to these types of claims. But on the other hand, so an escape of water within a plant room at a university. So in this particular example, the insured reported an escape of water within the virus research block. The escape of water was attributed to a failure of a gasket seal, essentially a washer, serving the gate valve supply and the new installed plumbing and heating work. And it appears that in this case, in particular, the fibrous washer was defectively manufactured or damaged on the installation. The result of this small washer being ineffective has damaged the DNA sequencing instruments at a cost of $682,000. Whilst there was no concerns with regards to the coverage, given the nature of the incident and a large indemnity spend, this claim is still ongoing 3 years later with solicitors at the minute, just pursuing a recovery, just due to the ineffectiveness of the washer that was installed at the replacement of the newly installed plumbing and heating pipework. But it just goes to show the varying differences within the ZM book of business, the different types of claims you can see. That's a brief overview for the claims, and I'll take any questions at the end, but I shall hand over to Paul Vincent.
Hi everyone, yeah, my name's Paul Vincent, Risk Engineer and Escape of Water for ZRS, Zurich Resilience Solutions. I've sort of nearly 30 years in the water industry and sort of come into the insurance industry looking at sort of escape of water claims. Let's see where we are. So yeah, I thought going off what Paul has just covered off with regard to some of those sort of examples he gave there of some of the instances, just to put some of the sort of volumes in context that can go into leaks. So on this slide here, on average, or at peak, I should say, not on average, at peak, leaks can run at about 60 litres per minute. And so if that was left for a day, that's equivalent to 152,000 pints of beer, as it says there, or 128,000 pounds worth of fuel, 1,700 tanks worth. So just to put a bit of context around some of the sort of volumes that you're talking that can go through properties. A bit more serious on point 3, there's a real sustainability issue here, certainly with my background in the water industry. A lot of leaks are from burst pipes. There is wastewater leaks, but a lot of these sort of flows come from burst pipes. And that's potable water, and there's a lot of expense and a lot of time and effort put into putting in sort of good quality water. We're one of the few countries where you can actually drink water from any part of the system. That's not all that common within the sort of the global context. So at that sort of flow, that's equivalent to 665 people's days worth of water. So if that goes over 10 days, you're into a small market town. And then the costs are changing, as you're probably all aware. In the news recently, there's been a lot about how water and bills are starting to increase. There's sort of, this is deliberate within the industry. I've been dealing with tariffs since 2007 in my previous work, and over the last few years that I was dealing with it, rather than being sort of like 3% increases, it went through the roof into double figures, right up to, I think some companies are now predicting 29, 30. So changes are always April the 1st, 29, 30, 49% from today, sort of costs. Reason for that is not just because they've got to improve infrastructure, and really in reality we will have to pay for that as customers. It's a privatized industry, but also there's a recognition in the industry that there's not the incentivization for people to take water seriously, be more efficient, repair leaks, control escape of water incidents. So they want to bring it in line with energy. Because energy is dominant within the utility sector with businesses and with people in general, because that's where the costs are. So I just put down some figures there for Thames Water this April. There was a £300 increase at sort of 60 litres a minute, so per day. So sorry, £300, but £300 increase in water charges. And so so it's now starting to move, that not just that there's a cost with regard to the insurance side of it. Residents will be more mindful of how much water they're actually losing in some of these instances. And all what I've talked about there doesn't come from a 4, 6, 8-inch pipe. It all comes from a 22mm pipe, a 3/4 inch, which is in every system within every property. So we're not talking like a large bore here. This is just a sort of normal bit of pipe that can leak. So yeah, I thought I'd just put that into a bit of context, just to sort of put some sort of numbers around that, some sort of figures. So we've gone through some of the sort of impacts of it. I thought I'd go into sort of some of the prevention reduction sort of techniques that we can use to try and sort of control some of this, and it is increasing. So a third of all claims within Zurich are escape of water, and also the costs of claims are increasing as well, as Paul outlined, with regard to the difficulties in getting construction teams and increase in raw materials to replace. So the way that we sort of can tackle this is, first of all, we start off with data. To measure is to know, and claims data. And so use claims data, certainly across a large portfolio. If a customer has a large portfolio of customers, of properties, use the claims data to start pulling out sort of hotspot properties. And then from that, you can then start sort of tailoring how you then approach it. And sort of what the way we can do that is sort of detailed on-site water assessment. And so I'll go out on site, do a scope of water risk assessment, and that's not just sort of evaluating the physical side of the pipe work, it's also sort of like looking at the management, and sort of have a way of capturing that, and I'll go into that later. And then from that we can then develop sort of water management plans, and these again can be linked back to your claims data, where maybe for more complex sites, or where there's sites where there's more of an issue, they can be more detailed, and the more generic approach for lower sites or smaller sites where there's not so much of issues, or there's just less complicated systems. And then sort of the last sort of part of the puzzle is leak prevention solutions. That's something that Andy can cover after me. He can go through that and how AquaLeak sort of deal with that. So if I just get into sort of the claims data, the next slide. So when you're looking at claims data, it can vary in quality, and but you can still use it. So in my previous life, I'd use water consumption data to pull out problem properties, and I covered all sectors, whether it be public sector, industry, or commercial. Within that role, I worked in several water companies doing that work. And what I found with claims data is, as I say, there's sort of, as it says there, there's 4 parameters. First of all, total cost per property. But not just that, the frequency, because that can show a trend. So it may be relatively low cost from a sort of insurance claims point of view, but if there's sort of 10, the chances are there's going to be a large failure at some point. Really, really useful is the source. This is where some of the quality can fall down a little bit. So if you have a good idea for a source and that data is good, you can then start picking up trends, like all the boilers or something are creating an issue. And then finally, location, so where it is happening. And you can sort of use these all in conjunction with each other to start pulling out hotspot properties, as I've said. And so that means you can sort of be targeted in how you approach like a large portfolio. And just here I've got some sort of evidence, some examples of some of the stuff that we've been looking at, and this is some from some actual data. The one on the left there, the pie chart on the left there, is 2020 to 2024 is frequency of claims, and then it's just slightly different total claim costs. And just what I just want to highlight in there is you'll see there that other is the biggest sector, and this is where you can start getting some of the issues with sort of some of the data inputting. So we've been working with some of the teams that do that to try and improve how that's recorded. You're always going to need that option other, because sometimes when claims are reported, the source isn't known at that point. So it's not like you can cancel it. But even so, with that data, you can see burst pipes is the bulk. Appliances is another big one. DIY, a lot of people fit them incorrectly. Generally, that comes from sort of the wastewater side of things, where it's not installed correctly. So yeah, that's on that side. And then that same data, if you put it across into sort of total claims, burst pipes really does become dominant. So what that means is, at least here, you can start thinking, well, the issue at this particular customer is that it's sort of on the water side, not wastewater side, and then you can start thinking about how you approach that. So yeah, I thought I'd just sort of put that in there, and you can start then coming up with some sort of idea of where to target. And when you do total costs against properties, so total costs up the side and properties along the bottom, there generally is a big steep curve off. So there's I've got one particular customer, I think they've got about 100,000 blocks, and all those 100,000 blocks, the bulk of the issues are within 100 properties ish. So you can see that it really is targeted properties. So if you target those and really go into those properties with sort of more of a in-depth look, you can then really start improving the performance across the portfolio. And so there's sort of like a graded sort of approach that you can use with the claims data, from being very intense on some properties to then being more generic with others. So like I said on this slide here, once we've done the claims data, we can then start going into sort of on-site, developing a water management plan and then leak solution. But what I've been finding when I've been going out on the sort of on-site stuff, and as Paul alluded to, there's some really basic stuff that people just don't know on site that they can use, and it's really effective. and that's something called consumption watching on meters, and stop tap management, and just knowing where they are and what they do, how to operate them, and having those centrally recorded. So if I just go on to consumption watching, this is something that I've done for years. When I first started in the industry, I started in leakage. It was something that I was told about at that time. It's something that I've done ever since. And what all that is just watching a water meter, literally consumption watching, and you can do it for a very short space of time. And once you get an eye for it, you can really start picking up some issues. And meters aren't just there to charge you. They're actually there for monitoring as much as charging, if not more. They're there for monitoring, and they're designed to make it easy for people as well. So, moves on the slide. Why is that moving on the slide? There we go. I think I knocked that. And they're designed to make it easy to do consumption watching. So just on that top left picture there, I've got a typical meter. It's an 07. That's the serial number at the top. Know the age of it by the first 2 digits. That's common across the industry for water. They are now introducing digital meters. So this is a register, so an analog one, but they have got digital, and I can go into how you do this with digital. And so the white dials along top there, they're cubes. That's what you charge against. The red ones are units, so hundreds, tens, and litres. On this particular meter, there's not 3 red dials there. Normally you get that. They've actually got the litres as a dial, which you can see the smaller dial above the top red arrow, and then they've got the more sensitive dial below, which is 1/10 of a litre. And what they are for are to start showing sensitive flows. And generally what you're going to pick up on these when you do consumption watching is just continuous flow. So like a dishwasher takes water at around about 10-15 litres a minute. On here, if you see something that's taking it at, say, like 4 litres a minute, then chances are that's going to be an issue. But more importantly, that middle dial that I pointed out, the green one, that's something called a trickle dial. And that's not related to any flow or anything. That's solely there to pick up leakage and to display it clearly. And that's green. Sometimes they're silver, but they're generally in the middle like that. There are different types of meters, but the bulk of meters for sort of domestic properties and most commercial will be of this type. And that's just solely there for picking up leaks. And what you're looking for is a steady turn, or even just a little bitty turn like that. And the idea is you watch it for a little while. So when I do an assessment, I'll go through all the meters, I'll go up the property, come back down if it's a block of flats, and I'll make a note of where I see some consumption which I think isn't genuine consumption. It looks like it's some background leakage, and then I'll check it again, and if it's still turning, then I'll raise that as sort of something that needs to be checked. And one particular property I did, about 40 flats, I found about 15 of them with this issue, and they all had leaks. And the property manager went round, he started doing this, and he built this into they've now built this sort of into their sort of regular sort of maintenance regimes, and he's picked up a couple of leaks since. One of them quite a large one beneath a bath on flat 4, that particular property. So yeah, it's quite it's really effective, and it's really worth using it. Most people just ignore water meters, but they are there mainly to check for monitoring as well as charging. So that's one thing you can do. Digital meters, what you see on those, it's like a calculator dial, and you'll see a plus sign flashing like this. It flashes if that's the trickle dial. That's the alternative to that one. So if you see that, then it's worth sort of noting that and checking it. So secondly, just stop tap management. When I've gone through a lot of sort of major claims, and without fail, a big part of the major claim is the fact they can't isolate it quickly. And within the loss adjusters reports, the forensic plumbing reports, that it is just in there. It took 2 hours to turn off the stopcock. Either they didn't know where it was, or the door was locked, or it didn't work, or they couldn't find out which one it was because it wasn't labelled. So it's just basic stop tap management, and it's really, really important. And just clear labelling. So as you got there on the picture there on the bottom, those 2 pictures, these are I've taken all these. One on the left there, that's 14 flats, nice and easy, you can see that. The one on the right, there's 6 flats, those are going to outer space. And you can guarantee if you're going to get a big issue, it's going to be at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning or something, because that's when it happens. It generally happens at night, because that's when the pressure goes up, because no one's using, and it will find its weakest spot at that point. So yeah, just label those, and then they know exactly what to do to turn it off, rather than turning everybody off. So it also it sort of decreases the disruption to people. So yeah, and with these two, I thought I'd just highlight those because these are just simple low-level stuff that you can use to really sort of start to be proactive and reactive if you need to be, if there's an issue. But you can build this into a sort of wider sort of water management plan. And so a water management plan, what does it look like? It just depends on the property. So if you've got a residential property, just a simple residential property, you can have one for that. It doesn't have to be something formal. Even your own property, think about that. Do you know where your water meter is? Do you look at that once a month? Do you know where the rising main comes in? Can you shut that off easily? Does it work? When was the last time you shut it off? When you shut off a meter, shut it off, turn it right back and turn it back a couple of turns, and then it will never cease, for example. So just even sort of each of us, you know, we can all protect ourselves just with these sort of simple things. But this goes right the way through all properties, right up to the largest consumers. And it's so you design your sort of water management plan to suit the property you've got. And this again is linked back to that sort of data thing I was talking about. So if you've got a big complex block of residential flats, say for example, the reason I highlight those is because 70% of all the water claims come from those, and that's sort of where the focus mainly is for Zurich and the insurance industry. And it's just a case of building in these sort of simple steps. It's got to be well structured and well executed, but it's repetitive. Water is the fourth bridge. When you repair a leak, generally you push the pressure up, it'll find its next sort of weakest spot. You've got to keep on it. It's not fixed once you've just repaired a leak within a property. You've got to keep on that sort of journey with it. So I've got a few sort of categories there. Proactive inspections and maintenance, you know, so you go into a property, first off, identify where the real issues are. So the real risk areas. You might have a industrial property where you store valuable works of art, and there's a toilet above where you store it, for example. That's another risk. You want to be knowing this. That needs to be documented, needs to be recorded and looked at. Then go through the property and do something almost like an MOT for your property, or rag it red, amber and green. And you go through and say, well, that's green, that's fine. That's amber, we need to keep an eye on that. That's red, we need to be on it and repair it. You know, if there's a leak or something that you find. Every on-site assessment I've done, I've found multiple leaks. I've just found leaks everywhere, and some bad, some not. One particular one I went to, we opened the boiler cupboard door and got wet. That's how bad that one was. And that illustrates that water walks, just a simple thing like that, going around checking areas that people don't often go to, but water is present, like lofts, for example. That's the main one. As properties have improved in their insulation, some of the voids now where it used to seep through the heating, there's less of that, and so it's more important to have some form of lagging around the pipe or ambient temperature protection there, or just check it. Someone's checking it. So yeah, that's and you've got on here, and there's sort of water control and maintenance. So like I say, having that regular sort of maintenance, but having it focus on water as an issue. Going around doing your consumption watches, ideally once a month or maybe once a quarter. Have good control over sort of plumbers that come in and do the work. Give a good plumbers list to give an approved plumbers list to customers, customers to tenants within properties. Inspections, leak detection, testing and educating, training. Educating of tenants is really important. Good signing, for example, have something somewhere, have you seen a leak recently? Have you seen some discoloration? Tell people what they need to be looking for. Do you smell like damp? Have you seen damp anywhere appear within properties? Because there's two types of leaks. There's background leakage and total failure. And the way it works is you've got this long. So that's when it starts, that's when it finishes. And the start bit is like the discovery phase, and that lasts that long. And then the total failure is about that long, because clearly everybody knows it's there and it gets fixed. It's that discovery phase you want to get into. And all these first things here that I've got, all these sort of 5, are proactive approaches to sort of discovering leakage. It's that discovery thing. You want to get in there, repair that leak, and then you'll prevent the total failure or the big. And that's where that last one comes in, having a really clear emergency response plan. And again, that's just, say, like with stopcock location, make sure that's centrally located somewhere, not kept in someone's head who's been there for 30 years, who could leave and take all that knowledge with them. That's a really common issue. Certainly in the water industry, when I first joined, it was a big issue, and they've now sort of tried to solve that, to put that so everybody knows where everything is. That's all mapped very clearly. It's been going on for a long time now. That sort of problem's been solved. And so, yeah, you have clear communication lines, clear responsibilities, a 24-hour number that people can call. Tenants are aware of what they can do, because within the water industry, within the water regs, there has to be a internal stopcock within a property, so they can isolate themselves. Is it locked behind a door? Is it better to have key codes? All that type of stuff. Having that all there in a clear document that's well planned, well trained. Even have the odd drill. New staff come in. It's kept on the agenda of maintenance teams, quarterly meetings. Keep it on there as an agenda. Anything water, and just keep that training up, keep that visibility up, because water does get forgotten. And if you've got a property that has one of these in place, again, it's very bespoke to the property. There can be generic ones, but water doesn't change when it comes into a property. When it's installed, that's where it's going to be. It's never going to change. Very rarely. 100 years from now, you can guarantee pretty much that stopcock's still going to be in that place. And if that's all well trained out, you can really mitigate some of the issues with pretty low level and low cost. It's just a case of having it well structured and well executed and regularly reviewed and undertaken. So yeah, that's the sort of water management side of it. So I thought I'd just put a rogues gallery in there. Some of the stuff I've been finding. Top left, big one. I don't know why this is so common, but it is just freezing pipes. Everybody knows. And this was in a tank room. Pretty scary to get up there, to be honest, at the top of a block of flats. Below that was the main lift. So if that would have leaked, that would have caused no end of problems, not just claims, but also for the residents there. And as you can see, that pipe work, the lag has just all fallen away. It was put there originally in the 60s and it's not been sort of replaced. Next one along, this is a real big one. It's only minor. This pipe work here, the bottom pipe just above that sink, you can see probably a pipe just hanging. And retention clips are really important for the integrity of pipe work. Not all pipe work, but certainly still metal pipe work. And especially if you've got compression fittings that rely on grip. Any fittings that rely on grip, you really want a retention on the wall. Originally was retained to the wall, but the clips are broken and it was bouncing. Every time it was turned on, it bounced because there's water hammer. And at the end of that, just off picture, there was a leak coming out of the joint where it was going into the property. If that had leaked, that would have caused no end of problems. That would cause a very, very big claim. So yeah, just getting that retented and it will stop that issue. Next one along, that one there, that's grey PVC pipe. I've put that one in because that can be quite an issue. It's good stuff if it's stored correctly. The water industry went away from that years ago in the 80s. It used to be really the new big material to put in, grey PVC. The company I worked for prior to this installed all of that, and then they replaced it all. I worked 10 years as a main lane project manager on major renewals, and grey PVC was just a nightmare. Reason is, store it out in the sun, it goes brittle and it can split. Also with these joints, they're solvent joints, so you've got to be really careful with the glues you use. And at the moment, we've got a very big claim with a main riser pipe going up a very large, very tall block where it keeps failing because of storage and the type of solvent that was used to joint. Next one along, that's damp. You see any white brick work, definitely damp. Not always on new build, it's natural, but on older build like that, there's something going on. We found a leak next door getting into the guttering. Then the last two are just poor practice. So that's like I said about appliances and the waste part of it. This has an industrial ice machine. This is the waste flow from that, and it was just cable tied to a sink next to it. Got that properly plumbed in as it should be within the wastewater pipe work. So if you see anything like that, it's just a big no. And that was above the main electrical incomer for that property. The next one along, that was a piece of pipe that someone had either sawed or broken off or something and bent the pipe over and hit it and just sealed it that way. And they had a bucket underneath, and that was in the roof space of that particular property. So that's some of the things you can see, and they had a bucket under it, so they probably thought they repaired it, you know. So the, people know this stuff, but if you train it out, like I was saying in the water management plan, then people are aware and they'll say, well, hold on, we've got that, we need to do something with it, because it's going to create a big issue if we're not careful. So so that's that. The last slide, I just thought I'd put this in. This is a recent claim we've had. It's a large retirement complex on the south coast, had a large leak. So on the left there, you've got the loss adjusters report, gave us some information. It's a retirement complex, a complex individuals, residents. It was discovered immediately. It didn't happen at night. It was a Monday afternoon at 3:15. It was the main stopcock that failed. So you got a 100mm 4-inch pipe, full bore. It affected 1450 meters squared, sorry, and average depth 150mm 6-inch, and it lasts for 90 minutes. This is the loss adjuster report. The reason I quite like that is because then it can demonstrate some of what I've been talking about. So the impact of that, that sort of means that I know what the area is and the depth, the volume. I can work out the volume of water that went in. So that was 217.5 cubes of water, or 217,500 litres, equivalent to 1,673 people days in 90 minutes. So it lasts for 90 minutes, therefore you can put a flow rate on it. And that was running at 40 litres a second at that volume, which is equivalent to 20 Coke bottles, just to put it in context, 2 litre Coke bottles a second. So what is the worst statistic out of that, what I've just said? Is it the 217,000 litres, the 40 litres a second, or 90 minutes? Definitely the 90 minutes. Why did it take 90 minutes? So mitigation, if they'd had a water management plan there, they could have identified the external control. There is external control. They could have seen how deep that is, where it is, what tools they need, train that out. So if they needed to use that to isolate a property, and we all can, then they could have done that. If they just did water walks, they would have picked up that leak. There's no way a 4-inch pipe just fails. And so then they probably would have picked it up, it's leaking. Generally, rising mains are hidden right at the back of, you know, plant rooms and things. You've got to look for it to find it and know about it. So they could have probably picked that up and seen it was leaking, got it repaired and prevented the whole thing. So rather than waiting 90 minutes, if they'd have got it done in 10 minutes, shut off, rather than 217,000 litres, that'd have been 24,000 litres. And rather than 1,450 square meters affected, it would have been 161. So it's a far different case, it's a far different example. It wouldn't have been sort of on here. And the amount of residents affected would have been, bear in mind they're complex, would have been far less. So that's the importance of some of this that I'm trying. I thought it was quite a good way of sort of illustrating it. And that's me. So I'm now going to hand over to Andy from AquaLeak to go through leak prevention.
Thanks, Paul, and good morning, everybody. My name's Andrew Jones. I'm from AquaLeak, and we're a supplier of water leak detection systems. We provide an end-to-end service, so everything from the design and supply of products through to installation, maintenance, and commissioning. I'm conscious that there's a variety of different property types or portfolio managers on the call today. So this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the various leak detection approaches, but hopefully it will give you a good oversight. And if there's any specific questions, we do have a dedicated Zurich email for sort of information requests, which we can send around after the presentation. So just to look at the traditional types of the way leaks are detected. So there are two main types, really. There's flow-based leak detection and sensor-based leak detection. And what flow-based leak detection involves is the monitoring of real-time flow of water through a meter that's installed on pipework. These systems are effective at detecting from a single point. So 1 meter could typically monitor a whole property. So we typically see these installed in places like houses or apartments, where they're effective at detecting leaks that are happening in hidden places, behind walls, and so on and so forth. So if there's a burst pipe, these flow-based systems are very good at detecting the anomalies in flow and then taking an action. And they're much easier to retrofit as well. So the installation of these types of systems on pipework is a fairly straightforward installation that can be carried out by a qualified plumber. With sensor-based leak detection, this is where water actually comes into contact with a sensor probe or sensor cable. The effectiveness of these systems is determined by the placement of the sensors. And we see these much more common in commercial or industrial type scenarios where you've got access to floor voids, and you've got very specific areas that you're trying to monitor. These don't just detect the water coming from pipes as well, they can also detect water ingress, which can also be an issue and something that we are asked to protect against as well. These are harder to retrofit just simply because of the sort of the intrusive nature of where these sensors are installed. So we do tend to see these part of either new build or refurbishment style projects. But that just gives you a general overview of the types of the way leaks are detected. So let's move on and just have a look at some of the things to bear in mind. So in our experience, no two leak detection scenarios are the same. There's no silver bullet that will protect against a residential leak detection scenario versus a commercial leak detection scenario, and every case has its merits and its considerations. So this just gives you a bit of an overview of the things that we look for when we're considering a leak detection system. The type of application is a big one. So if it's a residential type scenario, then we typically recommend flow-based systems because of their effectiveness of picking up from that single source of detection on the flow meter. And then I think also the important one is the complexity of the plumbing system. So in residential houses, for example, where you might have multiple incoming water supplies, maybe a house has been changed over a period of time, the plumbing system has been changed. If there's booster sets in place, storage tanks in place in more commercial settings, for example, really understanding what the complexity of that plumbing system is and making sure that any leak detection system that's put in place is going to be effective at detecting a whole property and not just elements of the property. And we've missed things like water feeds that are feeding different parts of the property. I think another important one is understanding what we call zones or areas of a building you want to protect. So typically in commercial setting, you might be protecting WCs, kitchenettes, T-points, cleaner cupboards, and then right up to computer and server rooms where you've got the presence of water from cooling units, for example. If there's water present, you want to know pretty quickly if that water is escaping, particularly in critical infrastructure areas like IT or R&D laboratories, for example, so that you can quickly identify that leak and do something about it. I think the other thing is the action to be taken. So do you want instant action, i.e. automatic shut off of the water in that area? Or is it about early warning signs and signals going to your facilities management team so they can quickly investigate? As Paul just mentioned, time is of the essence with these things. So, any way that the leak detection system can alert you so that it can be addressed quickly, is critical. So if we go on to have a look at some of the specific examples of some installations. So this is what we would typically see in a residential application. This is a flow-based system installed just after the stopcock, and this is typically under a sink or in a utility cupboard. And that white panel there, that is essentially reading the flow of water that's going through the meter that's installed on the pipework, and it's measuring that real-time flow against adjustable parameters. So they look at both the volume of water going through a pipe and the continuous length of flow going through a pipe. And we think it's important to be measuring both of those because you might see a spike in flow, but if you don't have a time threshold, i.e. it's allowed to flow for say 30 minutes before it takes any sort of mitigating action, then obviously the damage can be significant even within 30 minutes of a burst pipe. So if either of those parameters are breached, then that panel will then go into alarm and trigger the automatic shut-off of that valve installed on the pipework so that it can instantly shut that water off and mitigate the amount of water that's being lost into the property. So this is typically what we see in terms of a residential application. And then just onto the next slide is a specific example. So our flow-based systems are uniquely specified on a large residential development in London, where these are installed in utility cupboards where they do both flow-based monitoring and also some sensor-based monitoring behind things like kitchen units or washing machine units where connections to some of the appliances can be corroded over time and can be a point of weakness in the system. This developer actually sought to put leak detection systems across their apartments because of a leak that occurred in a new build property, where the leak occurred on the 36th floor about 2 weeks prior to the handover of the building. And they didn't know about that until they detected the leak. They'd come down all 36 floors and landed in the reception area with the claim costs of around £9 million. So having been significantly sort of financially burned by the incident, they've now taken the decision to specify leak detection systems across their residential portfolio. So now let's look at the sensor-based types of leak detection systems, and this is a typical single zone, very simple leak detection system behind a T-point within an office block, for example. There you've got a run of sensor cable that's running behind the kitchen unit. And what will happen is if there's any sort of leak coming from any of the facilities or the appliances in that area, that will be detected by that sensing cable, feed that back to the leak detection panel there, and that will go into alarm. Those leak detection panels can trigger a number of actions, particularly on the sensor-based side of things. So that, as I say, can be automatic shut-off, but also connected to building management systems so that there can be central oversight of the leak detection systems, around the building. And they can also be adjusted for sensitivity, because we're conscious that in places like T-points where you might have, steam coming from, kettles and hot water supplies, that actually they can be adjustable as well to avoid, and mitigate against nuisance alarms. The blue box on the right-hand side there at the top, that's a sensor probe. And at the bottom there is sensor cable. Depending on typically to do with the footfall in an area, we tend to see that sensor probes are more resilient if you've got high footfall in an area. So we would install sensor probes, whereas if that footfall is lower, then or there's a larger area to be detected, then we would use that sensor cable. And these systems they're modular systems. So essentially you can go anything from one zone, like in the previous slide, through to 625 zones. So on the left-hand side there, that shows a multi-zone panel that can monitor either 5 or 10 zones from a single panel. That might be, for example, in the application on the screen there, you might have a sensor cable running around the perimeter wall of a server room, and then you might then have a probe in the drip trays under the air conditioning units, so that you can then distinguish exactly which zone has gone into alarm, and enabling you to quickly identify which area needs to be addressed. And then on the right-hand side there, you've got a large multi-floor system. As I say, they can go up to 625 zones, and they're effectively modular spider web approaches. So you don't have to have 1, 5, 10 or 625. You can just build them up using outstations on a sort of 5 and 10 zone basis. It allows you to future-proof as well, because what we often see is people want, say, 40 zones protected today, but then they have another area that they wish to add to in the future. So these modular-based approaches just help sort of spider web protection across large multi-floor, multi-zone buildings. So if we go on to the next slide, this just gives you a more of a sort of a commercial style application. This was at Manchester Metropolitan University. They've actually got a distance measuring system installed there in a new research facility. Distance measuring is pinpoint accuracy of a leak, so it can tell you to plus or minus 1 meter exactly where a leak has occurred along a run of cable. And because it was a research facility with a number of very high value pieces of equipment and intellectual property, they wanted to have that very, very pinpoint detection, so that they knew exactly where they needed to address their attention when a leak was detected. So this is just an example where the university has invested in a system, and I've put some costs there to give you some indicative costs. But that's been effective in detecting leaks in that property, and obviously saving from the cost of claims. And then just to look at the benefits finally, I think this presentation has obviously outlined all the risks that are there, and I think time is of the essence, as I mentioned earlier. So these systems are useful in the sense of bringing attention to the leaks occurring as quickly as possible and addressing those problems. I think there's the obvious financial considerations which have also been raised, the claim costs involved, and the associated costs with that, and then also the intangible costs, so the emotional costs if we're talking about residential problems where people are losing items of jewelry or photos or whatever it might be, sentimental items, if the emotional impact, and then the environmental impact, which is increasingly, as Paul mentioned, water consumption and water efficiency is becoming an increasing focus. So leak detection systems are a good way of just mitigating the unnecessary loss of water as well. So this hopefully just gives you an overview, as I say, albeit whistle stop, of the different types of leak detection systems that are available, but happy to answer any specific questions, and I'll hand back to Alex.
Thank you, all of you. Who else was running to try and look where their stopcock was when Paul was speaking? It's one of those things you kind of know and you forget. And anyway, good tips. We've had a few questions in already, but if anyone does want to ask a question of any of the three speakers that you've heard, or all of them, please do put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to as many as we can over the next 8 or so minutes. There have been a couple of quite specific questions, so I will start with those. So a while ago, Danny asked, I think, about the way that we're recording claims or claims causes. So I think it was when Paul Vincent was talking with other, where there's an other box. Is this followed by free text field to establish what the cause was, given that other category accounts for nearly a quarter of our escape of water claims?
Yeah, there is a sort of a free text box. The thing is, when you're looking through a lot of claims, certainly across a big portfolio over a number of years, there's a lot. So to manually go through that is possible to do. But yeah, there is free text box to sort of see where it does give an indication. But again, that's very sort of sporadic in how that's recorded. But there is that there, yeah.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul Gallagher, sorry, it's getting confusing. So that's something we're constantly looking at, the way in which we record our claims, the way we work with our loss adjusters on getting those causes right, so that we can do those targeted risk interventions.
Yeah, data quality is, sorry, Paul.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, data quality is key in getting the claims recorded correctly, and especially the source of the leaks, because it gives the insight to the business going forward, and as well as helping always risk management going forward. So data quality is a key in recording of that from a claims point of view.
Yeah, thank you. I think this next one, this is very specific, and I'm going to aim it at Paul Vincent because I think you're most qualified to answer. I think Balvinda has an ongoing issue that he's looking for advice on, where about locating a leak or a potential ongoing leak. Stopcocks to the building are turned off, but the meter is still running. Over a weekend, figures are 22 meters cubed. I think that means, yeah. So yeah, how could he go about locating the leak? Is it from the meter up to the building or inside the building? Can't figure it out. Yeah.
So if the stopcocks are isolated, that's on the underground supply pipe, and the meter's registering. What they need to do is turn off the stopcocks internally, which I've already done. Make sure that's really try some taps. Make sure that's holding and not given misleading. Clearly, it's upstream of that, so it's between the meter and the stopcock. That'll be underground. Different ways you can approach that. Generally, it's just replacement. But if you get a plumber out, they can then start sort of identifying where that is, and you can either just pin it, depending on the ground. So you literally put a pin down, watch that with electric and gas, and see that water rises. Like I say, I started as a leakage technician. That was what I did. So yeah, you can do that, or it's just a matter of sort of isolating the pipe work. It depends on the pipe run as well, how long it is, where it goes. Does it go under other properties? Is it more complex than the standard one that should just go through a front garden and rise up in the kitchen, wherever that is? And just at those flows, so it's 11 cube a day ish, which is equivalent to 5,500 bottles of Coke. Over a year, if that's let to go, because sewerage is based off your charge for your your water as well. So that would be equivalent to 8,030 cubes. And if that comes in at £1.20 a cube across water and wastewater, you're looking at about £9,600 for a year. So that's quite a substantial leak going on there. So the quicker it's resolved, the better. So basically just get a plumber out, because if you leave it too long, that's going to cost quite a lot of money. And you might have some insurance as well. So what water companies do have insurance for private sites, but generally they only cover up to about £500 worth of work. But it's worth checking. Housing insurance, I don't know if that covers it, so there's a bit of a grey area around that. Anyway.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
So there was a question quite early on about risk management guidance or information with respect to escape of water claims. So obviously we've done this webinar, but have Zurich or Aqualeak, have we got any particular guidance that we could share out after this, along with the recording, or anywhere where you could signpost people for further guidance and information? Andrew and Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we have seen a lot of the construction insurers risk engineers group, and they produce something specifically about construction phase, but actually it then goes into operational ongoing guidance, and that talks about water management plans as well. We know that that's been a very popular guide that people have referred to. There was a new version, I think 2024. But yeah, that's one that we've seen particularly popular.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of supporting documentation as well we can issue and send out. There's a lot on the nets, and we do have sort of guides as well to help with all of this, what we talked about. Because like I say, a lot of it is quite simple measures. It just needs to be sort of recorded correctly and sort of actioned in a sort of structured way.
Thank you. So yeah, in answer to that question, and for everyone on the call, I think we'll try and get some links out with this, with the recording link that we'll send out afterwards, or we'll follow up with links. Did I say link or leak?
It's in your brain.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I can see Michelle, thank you for your question. I don't know the answer to this. I'm not an underwriter, so I don't know if anyone else on the call, not on the call, of our presenters knows, but does Zurich provide or know of another insurer who will provide cover for leaks on supply pipe work outside of property boundary but before water meter? It's okay if we don't, we can follow up and reply, but does anyone have
I'll
any
take
insight?
that one, Alex, because
Great, thanks.
if it's within the boundary of the premises, then it won't be classed as escape of water. It'll be classed as underground services, which is a general coverage under the property. So if it's within the premises, it's under the ground. Although it is technically classed as an escape of water, it's classed as underground services, and that's general coverage from under the property insurance.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Just to add to that as well, the meter isn't always where the sort of it is the legal definition of ownership, so it changes to private pipe after the meter, but in practice it's the boundary, because sometimes meters can be quite back from the boundary, so out in the highway a little bit more. So generally it's from sort of the point of the boundary. So in theory, if the leak is within sort of the highway part of that, of the supply pipe, then the water company will repair that, and you can phone them up and get them to come out and look at that for you as well. But yeah, just so you're aware. And also when it comes to sewerage, you can make a claim on that, because you can argue that doesn't return to the water company to deal with. It leaks into the ground, so therefore why should you pay a sewerage return on that? So you can ask for a rebate on your sewerage. So that's where sort of reading your meter, doing the timed read over a minute to see how many litres you've got, times that up into a day, and then you can then put a volume on that. Or you can use your water bill to work out what your average is, and then see what your higher average is, and then put a claim in. So that's always possible as well.
Just to expand sort of further on that, Alex, there is separate coverage under the policy for loss of metered water. So if you do check the policy, if there is an underground services burst and you're unbeknown, it's been going on for a while, and you get a big massive water leak bill, then there is separate coverage on policies generally for that as well.
Okay, so it's a bit of a call for help from Michelle coming in following that answer. So yeah, we will pick up with you, Michelle, afterwards on this, whether we can call you. I don't know if we have your details, but we've certainly got your email address and your registration, so we will follow up with you to discuss that in more detail. So we're at time. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to all three of our presenters for such a comprehensive overview of escape of water, claims and solutions. We will send out the recording of this webinar. Like I say, you can rewatch it or share it with colleagues or other interested parties to try and take action on this, along with some links to some guidance which is appropriate to what we've talked about. So thank you. We're having a break now over the summer, but we'll be back with more risk webinars with your resilient solutions from September. So look out for your invitations coming through for those, where we'll cover more risk topics that are at the top of everyone's lists. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.